All right, welcome to the Underdog Ecom podcast, where two ecom brand founders are figuring out in real time.
Yeah, we're not here to preach. We're here in the thick of it, making mistakes, testing all sorts of ideas, and really sharing the journey of how we've been growing these brands from day zero. Hopefully you learn a little bit, perhaps come away with some ideas that save you time and money. And so if you're tired of the same glittery D2C advice from those 9-figure gurus, you're here in the right place.
Let's get into it. Welcome, guys, to episode 20 of the Underdog Ecom podcast. And I am really happy we've made it to 20. I think that's pretty cool. I was actually well, first of all, how are we doing, David?
Alive, surviving.
You're live.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm good. I was literally just picking up my sister from the airport before this episode. I was telling her I was coming back to record this. And she's like, oh, how many episodes are you in? I said, actually, this is 20 today. And she said, that's amazing, because I've heard that like 90%, she says, like statistic, like 90% of podcasts don't make it to 10 episodes. So there we are. That's a pretty good achievement, I think.
We're consistent. We've got that going for us.
We're fairly consistent. Yeah, I think we are. Even though we're kind of fighting fires most of the time, I think we've managed to keep it going, which is great. And I saw there's been a couple of comments here and there on YouTube and stuff, and people saying some cool things. And so, I mean, not tons, but there's definitely been some like cool feedback, and yeah, we really appreciate that. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun, I think, so far.
Yeah, it's been a blast, and it is, it's always a struggle to manage on top of everything else, but we do keep this to a minimum in terms of like, we're not trying to push this to be the next great podcast or whatever. It'd be cool if it got there, but we have our jobs that we're running, our businesses that we're running, and they're a lot of work and they're really hard. And this is live, uncut, no editing, no like fancy pants editor behind the scenes, cutting out the ums and the ahs and the silly comments that we make. It's all just straight, unfiltered Underdog founders chatting it up here. So we appreciate you, the listeners. We're here for you. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, and for further context, just so people understand like how off the cuff this is, like even like the plan for this episode was decided about an hour and a half ago. So this is what we're working with here. But I think we're doing a pretty good job regardless.
We think so. You should let us know your thoughts though. Give us your reviews, 5 stars, leave a comment on YouTube. But we do have a list of topics that we try and run through, a lot of the things that are happening in our worlds with ecom and that sort of thing. But definitely want to make sure that it's what you want to hear about, especially as it relates to Underdog e-commerce folks out there that are also trying to make this thing work as they go from 0 to 7, 8 figures or whatever, and then start listening to some other hotshot big name podcast.
Yeah. And I think like what idea with this as well is just that we wanted to be a bit more like really like in the weeds with it, in the sense that we kind of day to day running our brands and wanted to kind of share the things we're going through and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's what we're trying to aim for, and trying to that's why we're not overproducing it, and we're trying to keep it very kind of real conversations. But like you said, David, we're always up for feedback and improving it.
Yep. Real, authentic, no shilling. That's what we're all about. How are things in ecom land for you, Jack, over the last couple of weeks since we've chatted?
Yeah, they've been okay. I mean, I think I've been focusing a lot on finance. I think we've spoke about this quite a few in the episodes, but just drilling down into like into details of where all my money is going. I think is always what I'm trying to figure out, because it just seems like there's just like someone coming in at the end of the day and like siphoning it off, and then I wake up the next morning, I'm like, where did that go? But yeah, no, I think I've been thinking like I spent far too long. I mean, this is not good, but like I wake up pretty early in the mornings, like usually before my girlfriend, and I'm just like, I usually wake up thinking about things. And so I spent like the last few days, early mornings, just like working through a spreadsheet, trying to figure out like what is costing me on shipping so much money and stuff like that. And I think I've made some gains in terms of trying to kind of be a bit more structured in terms of, I think part of, and I think this goes into a wider thing, but I think part of what I've started to realize recently is that it's very easy for your ego, really, at least in my opinion, my ego. I think I've struggled a lot with like wanting to sell globally and wanting to, almost be like a bigger brand than we are. And the problem is when you do that is you make decisions as if you were a much larger brand, and you spend money unnecessarily. So for example, with us, I've just been very loose with allowing people to buy from various different locations, and I've tried to maximize shipping as best I can. But then what's happened is I've been out of stock in one place, and I had to split shipments between one place, another place to a somewhere really far away. And then you drill down as numbers, you realize it's just not making any money doing that. And you got to be really, as much as you want to, sell your products to everyone who wants them. If you can't make the finances work, you should probably start somewhere smaller, grow there, and then move on. And I think that's one of the things I've been learning recently.
I think that's a really good takeaway. And it's also kind of a teaser for the larger context of the conversation today. We were going to talk a little bit more about if we were to start over from scratch, what we would do differently. And I've got a lot of thoughts related to that are very much in line with that kind of concept that you're hinting at, where it's like, oh, put the ego aside and do what's best for the brand at the particular point that you're in with the goal of the next stage, because there's definitely so many things out there. And I think this is highly applicable to Underdog Ecom folks out there, is like, there's so many things that are out there that are for a different stage. There's so many things that you can only do that you can't really do at this stage or shouldn't do at this stage. And there's, we've talked about shiny objects before and focus in another episode, a lot of other things contextually that make sense in a different stage, but not for where you're at. And so I think those are really good learnings and really good things to like focus on and improve in the brand. I like it.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it then. I think, yeah, you go first. What were you saying on that? I think or where do you want to start? Should we start with more on on the product level, or on more in terms of learnings in terms of what you would, so I think what this episode is really about, what if we just started again from scratch, what do we know now? What do we do differently? Would if we were starting a completely different brand, ideally what would, would the structure look like? How would we start it? All that sort of stuff. So maybe we should start with the structure, I guess, or the product itself. I suppose it is the simplest part of it is I think this has been talked about a lot by a lot of people, but I suppose what type of product would you, if you couldn't sell what you're selling now, what sort of category, or yeah, would you think about going into?
If I was trying, I mean, it depends on your goals, right? Like, I like what I do now. I love designing physical products and making them. So I'm not really, and I kind of fell into all of this. And so I'm not necessarily thinking that I would want to change everything up. But if I were to go back and maybe try and maximize my revenue and buy a fancy new Land Rover or something, it would be something that is consumable, that has a long shelf life, that's easy to ship, that
Yeah.
is probably hydration packets or something like that, or gummies or something, that hits pretty much all of those quote unquote easy golden D2C rules, that make it highly valuable, that have a really good weight ratio for shipping, that keeps shipping low, something consumable so you get people on repeat orders and you have recurring revenue. I feel like in some ways, ultimately my brand is kind of a fashion brand, and fashion either hits or misses, and it's really hard to find the hits. And when you do hit, you can make it big or whatever kind of thing, but that's really difficult to do. And I think a lot of times I've struggled in the past with marketing and how do you market that. And it's kind of you don't really do value-based marketing. You're not selling gummies that improve your sleep 100 times. You're selling a t-shirt. That's does someone like it or not like it? And it's a snap judgment whether they like it or not. You can't really sell the value props of it until you have the thumbs up from them in terms of if they approve of the design or the feel or the vibes. And so starting over from scratch, if I wanted to maximize revenue, it'd be more of something that could be quote unquote more easily marketed. In terms of me not really having a marketing background, I feel like it seems easier to me to be able to sell a hydration packet that can help you sleep better, or maximize your electrolytes after a run. And there's 7,000 new brands every day that sell hydration packets, but there's a reason why there's 7,000 brands every day selling hydration packets.
Well, on that, so this is what I've thought for a long time. I kind of thought oh, it's quite difficult. I'm similar in the sense that it's a lot more of the sort of style and sort of aspiration, I think, with our product than it is solving a particular problem. And so for a long time I thought, oh my god, I wish I could wish the product was smaller. Which I think is valid. I think having in e-commerce, having a smaller, lighter but still valuable product is definitely helpful. As long as it's not alcohol or something. It's probably impossible to ship, or very hard to ship. But something like that. But I don't necessarily. I've been thinking about this a lot. I've whether if I had more of like a wellness brand or something, you know what I mean? Like, that's like all the rage right now. I think yes, like you're right in the sense that it is easier in some ways to push something that's like a benefit, like an actual benefit. But I also wonder if actually that, like you said, you haven't got a marketing background, but I mean, I receive your emails and like, and they're very good. I mean, like but like, I mean, in terms of, not, I'm not talking about necessarily like, obviously you've got like, your design is good and everything, but I just mean in terms of the way you position them is very good. And so I'd actually argue that I used to think that I'd be better doing that, but actually, no, I think if I had to go and do a business again, I think I would stay somewhere around where I am because the fact that
Mhm.
I think I've learned how to kind of solve that, or at least not solve it, but like get, partly solve that problem of like, how do you communicate that to somebody, and you almost get used to communicating that. Whereas like I almost wonder if, yes, the wellness side is like a big trend right now. There's a huge amount of competition though, and if all you can differentiate yourself on is benefits that everyone else also, says they have, like if there's no intrinsic feeling that you can communicate to the customer, like is that actually as easy as it sounds? I don't know.
Mhm.
That's what I've been thinking recently. I don't know. I mean, I might be completely wrong.
No, I think that's fair. I think grass is always greener is definitely
Yeah.
something that could be a struggle as we talk through this topic and stuff. And so you're right. Like I don't think that if I were to start everything over right now, based on everything I've learned and that sort of thing, I don't think I would automatically reach for something like that. I've just felt that allure of like, oh, it seems like it's easier to market this sort of thing, and it feels like what doing this really really hard, and it would be nice if it was easier. But it probably is not easier, in the grand scheme of things. Every ecom is hard, and there's a reason why only 1% of brands or whatever make it in the ecom space or whatever that percentage is. Like it's very small. I think a large, more so than product. Like I'm pretty okay with my product. That I wouldn't change a whole lot. Probably, I think there's so many other learnings that would be way more valuable to like go back and tell. I don't know, past Dave or whatever. And it's like kind of what you're talking about, where focus and expanding and extending too far. Like I remember years ago when the brand was doing a couple dozen, like under 100 orders a month easily. Very, very small brand, my brand back years ago. And I had hired like a marketing agency through a friend of a friend to do like Facebook ads. And looking back, it was like, what was I thinking? Like there's so much that you need to do first, and there's so much that you shouldn't focus on. Like a website, for example, is something that comes pretty naturally to me being a Shopify developer, but that's not really that important at the end of the day. The most important thing needs to be 90% of your focus. Like it's like
Yeah.
20% of the things needs to be 80% of the focus, the Pareto rule. And so focusing on brand marketing, merchandising, product market fit, figuring out what people actually want to buy. I think I've struggled for years trying to market the wrong things. And it's just like, at the end of the day, you can only throw your head against the wall so many times, and, a couple of people will buy it. But when you have those things that people latch onto that they really, really want, that feels so good. And it's so nice when that happens. And so, kind of like you're talking about expanding into other markets probably before you have the operational capacity to do that, and you're kind of just one person. I think that I've done that on so many different fronts, with whether it's Facebook ads, whether it's shiny objects here and there. Like I remember I installed the Fondue Cash app a couple years ago because that was all the rage, and I eventually cut it like within the last year or two because it was just, every little thing takes time away from the main focus. And all those little things, whether it's some sexy new app or some sexy new strategy, like it doesn't matter when you're not
Yeah.
7 figures, like, or even 8 figures. Like you need to focus on what drives the majority of your business, probably Facebook ads at this point. And that's like, I still beat myself up over this. Like I should be probably spending hours a week working on my Facebook ads, creating new ads, which I, for some reason, have hit a wall with. I think I've got burnt out in creating content and ads and stuff, but that needs to be the primary focus. And so, like, all of these things, I'd go back and I've gone through so many different versions of the website, and like, I was on WooCommerce back in the day, and so many different things where it's like, no, you need to focus on, it's almost like you need to put a post-it note and stick it to my forehead where it's like, focus on profitability, focus on focus and product market fit. Um, and not get distracted because there's so many distractions, and kind of just be like heads down. I think another thing with ecom is there's a lot of dopamine hits in this realm. And, we talked about this before the pod a little bit. I launched a new product today, a new product in a new product category. And I've been working on it for months, and I've been hyping it, and people love it, and they seem like they love it. And so I launched it, and I'm sitting there like watching Shopify, uh, the like live view, and feeling pretty disappointed with how many people it was like. When I sent out the stuff, it was like 20 people on the site, and I felt let down. And it's like, the dopamine of like getting those orders in and that sort of thing. And I think I've chased the order dopamine hits too much in the past and sacrificed profitability and focused, and I've spent too much on Facebook ads, and they haven't been as profitable. And so like there's a lot of things, I guess, wrapped up in all of that. That's a long. I just
think
dumped basically.
no, but I mean, it all comes down to. I mean, it comes down to a couple of different things. But I mean, I completely agree. I think the problem. There's part of it is our fault. Like, I think you have to take responsibility for it in some way. Like,
Yeah.
I've done the exact same thing you have, on many different levels, and I continue to make those mistakes. A lot of it comes down to wanting to be in a future state, not accepting that you're not in that future state, and acting as if you're in that future state, and then making decisions as if you wouldn't as if things were different, because it helps you feel better. And it's almost like, it's a blunt way to say it, and maybe it's, I mean, maybe it's more me I'm talking about here, I don't know, but it seems to be a problem. And I think part of it is like, a lot of the people who are in the ecom space, who are the people who have voices, are obviously at a very different stage from us. And I have this with tennis, as as a tennis player. Um, in tennis, that you aspire to be, in any sport, you aspire to be, the top players, and so you try and do what they do, right? And so, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not so good, because the way, you see, it's even an example, like you'll see Roger Federer, and when he was playing Wimbledon, like barely moving, like joking around. He's relaxing, trying to get into it, but doesn't mean that when you go into a tournament, you should act like that. You need to be a bit more like, you got more on the line. You've got to get somewhere. You're not somebody yet, right? And so, but you'd see a lot of players at the tournaments kind of acting a bit like that, as if they view it all. If they were already there, they're not there. They haven't got where they've got. And it's like, sometimes it's very easy to kind of, it makes you feel better to put yourself in that bucket, even if you're not doing it, if you're not saying it, it's in your actions. And I've done it so many times as well. And really, the businesses that do well, I think they eventually do well, because at the beginning, they've actually said, like, this is what we have, and this is what we're going to do with it, and this is where we are. And they've just taken it one step forward, like climbing the ladder, so to speak, and not like trying to jump 20 steps at once and hope that it's going to work.
Yeah, climbing the ladder is a good way to think about it, because I think that can be applied to so many different things. It's like, know your brand, know where you're at. This could be applied to your Facebook ads structure and account and catalog and your organic content. And like, I was actually talking about this sort of idea a little bit the other day with my shipping person who I've been training on creating content with, and she's been digging into that realm, and it's been really interesting and fun to kind of like train her on that, and helpful to alleviate, like, pull it off of my to-do list a little bit. And she and I struggle with perfectionism, and it's like, oh, this video that I've worked on for 3 weeks needs to be perfect. And it's like, no, just get it out there and like improve on it the next time, and get it out there and improve it on the next time. Like, we're not Nike. It doesn't have to be this totally polished, perfect video that every second has been framed out and storyboarded and everything like that. It's like, it at this point, it's just get it out there. And even with product, I see this as well, like climbing the ladder with product development. Like, I want to create the perfect jacket that has like all of the elements that are, like super well thought about, like this thing over here and this thing over here and this and the material over here and this and that. And it's, that's the top of the ladder, and like I'm down here at the bottom of the ladder. And so like, make gradual improvements, focus on the end goal, knowing where you're at, but also like where you're at's where you're at, and sort of like work your way up that ladder. Super applicable, I think, in a lot of realms.
Yeah, I think I've got tons of examples as well. Like with product, for example, like I launched far too many colors when I first started, and I've had that problem in the past, and it's because I saw like the Peak Designs of the world and, you know, Patagonia's of the world, you see like they've got one new bag comes in 8 colors, and you're like, well, this is amazing. Like that's what I've got to do. No, it's not. Like they've they like they've got so much demand now. They can do that. But like that doesn't mean. And actually, you go back, I can see some of their Kickstarters that came one color, like one bag, one color, some like things like that. I've done that tons. Or you know, like I mentioned about the shipping. I've done all sorts of things, like had multiple warehouses. I've kept it in multiple places. Like never had the volume to do that, and I've done that. And it never works out in your favor. Like it never does. Like there are risks worth taking, I think. I mean, that's the caveat. There are risks worth taking, but you've got to be like so sure about it, and it's got to be like integral to what you're doing. Because I think that's a otherwise it's a risk not worth taking, I think, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. What else? So I think focus, product market fit is so important, and like not overextending yourself or your brand into things that are, you know, a couple steps above you on the ladder. What else would you like do differently?
I think honestly, um, I would put the effort into content early on. I think the problem is that um, it's at the beginning. It's a lot of effort with content because first of all, you're not good at it at the beginning. Like I mean, like you're just not going to be. Like very few people are brilliant at content at the beginning, and but you have the least to lose at the beginning. Like you can put anything out there and literally nobody cares. And yet it's a time where people don't do it. And then and at least I found that with my, you know, with Canchers, that I really, I didn't want to face the idea of like, what content do we do? So it's like I did zero content, but it was very kind of like slow and didn't really come in as often as it should have because I was spending too much time trying to figure out what would be the perfect content for us to create. Whereas I know if I'd started that, even if the content hadn't been great, if I'd started that 4 years ago to do it like as frequently as I'm doing it now, to do it 4 years ago, we'd be in a very different position. And that's like the compounding effect, I think. And it doesn't mean hiring somebody. It doesn't mean, you know, buying an expensive camera. It doesn't mean doing all that sort of stuff. It just means consistency at the beginning with that stuff. That's something I think I would do. Done.
That's interesting. I've seen some of your videos lately. They've been popping up in my feed. They're solid. Like I think that, yeah, I think the ideas behind it and the concepts and stuff, especially speaking to your target audience, like as that grows and as you keep doing that, like I think there's good potential there. So nice work.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's really kind. I think the thing is that it is for some reason there's this like, well, you have too many choices, or like you just kind of stagnate, and because you think because you there's always I've always feel there's always a reason why you shouldn't do something. Like there's like you shouldn't that you can always come up with a reason not to do something, and if you spend too much time deliberating on that, you just kind of paralyze yourself and you don't do anything. Especially when it comes to content, because you're so, especially as a brand owner, I'd imagine you find the same. Like you could be very self-critical, and everything that the brand does is almost like a reflection of you, and therefore you're extra critical about it, and so you almost like don't want to see anything go out unless it's perfect. And that's a big problem as well, is like overly perfection when you're like, especially when you're starting something, because you won't give yourself any room to breathe and to learn.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I definitely see that with myself where it's like, oh no, this button color has to be perfect, or like this copy has to be perfect. And I think I've released a lot of that sort of mind trap these days, and I'm kind of like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like whatever hits is the most important, especially when it comes to content and stuff. Like it doesn't have to be perfectly on brand. It's tricky. Like, so as I've been training my shipping person on doing content, like these videos she's putting together are different than how I would do it. And I've trained and like, you know, prescribed like, here, follow these instructions and these SOPs and these types of things. But, you know, it's hard to encapsulate everything that you're doing when you're creating content. And so there's a part of me where it's like, I just need to like kind of release a little bit and like, nope, let her run with it, see what happens. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You know, especially with organic content, like 10 people see it and then it's gone or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that important. It's not a make or break situation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Another thing that comes to mind, I don't know if this might be more of my personality, but I'm feeling it might be similar for you. But when it comes to hard decisions, I I almost struggle a little bit, to take on board other people's opinions when it comes to like a difficult decision. So if you go to someone and say, what do you think I should do, sort of thing, and they'll say to you, well, have you tried this? You say, well, no, I can't do that because of that. And they'll say, okay, but what about that? No, I've thought about that. I can't do that. And they'll say, okay, what about this? And you say, yeah, but I can't do that because of this. And then they'll say like, well, why did you ask me then? And you think, well, actually, that's so true. Why did I ask you? Because actually, I was so, I'm so closed in my own mind about it that I automatically dismiss anything coming in. And I think sometimes it's a good thing, but I think often in business, like when you're starting something like this, is that you also have to be very open to other people's opinions, and it can be very, very difficult to be, because you could, again, going back to almost like a reflection of you, you're almost trying to protect yourself a little bit. Because I think doing this is really hard, and you put yourself out there, and customers might leave bad reviews. They might, you're just putting yourself publicly out there, and so when people give their opinions, you can be very closed off about it. And I think that's something that I'm trying to get better at. Is that you obviously you have to understand, as in it's your company, you make decisions, and you got to be, stand by them. But at the same time, it's like this ability to be open minded about things, and not dismiss them immediately, and then still be able to make your own decisions after that, I think.
Yeah, I think being open minded is very important, especially as you wrestle with being the founder and like ownership over everything and being a reflection of yourself, like you're saying. I think another thing that comes to mind when you're talking through that is knowing what. So trying out different things, but you have to be careful with that, because I've gotten in trouble with that before, where I've tried too many different things. But I think my problem was I tried too many things but didn't know what was working. And so you have to be hyper diligent about trying new things and seeing where to push that gas pedal. Like, is it a certain angle in the ads? Is it a certain type of ad? Is it a certain product? Is it a certain marketing angle? Like, whatever that is, where you start to see traction, push in that direction, because that will give you, like, wherever the ROI is, like, focus on that. Like, it's kind of that focus concept, but you need to focus on what is driving the revenue, what is driving the profits, like whatever makes the company work. It sounds so simple. Whatever is making the company work, focus on it, right? But it's really hard, and I feel like so much of my time is spent putting out fires and playing catch up and like running after the lob after I've been sitting at the net for half of the set, like, and instead, like, I'm not thinking about it and taking a second to think, like, strategy wise, like, maybe I shouldn't be at the net. Maybe I should be at the baseline hitting ground strokes or something. We're going deep on premise today, folks.
I love it as a reference.
Yeah. And like, what is my opponent bad at or whatever? Like, what am I good at? Like, maybe that's what I need to focus on, is what I'm good at. And I think it's just so hard when you're just kind of feel like you're fire hose drinking, and like, no, take a step back, take, a couple hours to think about things, assess things, analyze things. But it's so hard when you're one person just playing catch up. But I think that would be something I'd tell myself.
Yeah, and I think when you hear a lot of you hear someone like, say, Sean Frank at Ridge, he'll often say something like, "Oh, if I started again, I would just do content. I wouldn't, and I'd get up to a certain amount of sales, and then I would do ads and stuff like that." I think the reason they say that is they know that with every time you do any of these things, there's a financial risk, and when you can do things that have zero financial risk, like say content, there's time risk, but at least the beginning time is not quite as essential as it gets to be later on. So I think that there's that sort of thing as well. I think it's not because I think there's two reasons. You've got to be able to understand what's resonating with people, and then I think the other thing as well is that you can test a lot of things, and with minimal financial difficulty. Whereas the thing with Facebook ads is that you can take most of the time you can take a big risk. You're going to take a big risk on things, and it normally is, like, for most brands, a big channel. But again, like you said, testing many different things at once is difficult because you need to, but at the same time you can over test, and it's like landing page testing and stuff like that. It's like, well, ideally, yes. I would be testing out 10 different landing pages for every different product. I'd be testing, headlines. But But again, I'm not there yet, so I can spend a huge amount of resources getting a load of data that probably isn't accurate, or I can spend it on creating good content or something like that, which
Mhm.
is at least going to put me out, like my brand out there, and is going to get more people. I think that's the other thing as well is, um, it's almost like at the beginning. Yes, you have to focus a lot on the product, and that product, I think that ever changes from the day you start to the day you finish, sell, whatever you do. Um, you have to focus a huge amount on the product, but at the beginning, I think it's almost like how many eyeballs can I get, and then it becomes later on like how do I convert that into sales? How do I get that into how do I get more more sales of this new product? How do I get my AOV up? How do I get repeat purchases? Like all those. And I think I you could spend a lot of time at the beginning thinking like, how do I increase my repurchase rate? Well, just get more people knowing about who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Get more people at the end of the day.
Yeah. And again, it's the
Yep.
hardest thing. Like it is easy. What's the problem as well is it's quite easy to log on to Shopify and set up like a test, of some kind, and
Yeah.
feel like you've achieved something.
Yeah.
And so and that's not like to put that down, because there is a place and it's good, and it's a skills that like are good to have, to understand Shopify really well, to be able to do that sort of thing, to understand what you're using, tech stack, all that sort of stuff. Definitely, it's useful. But I just think that like I've spent too much time on that. Where I feel like I've spent too much time on making tweaks and things like that for a relatively small percentage of people to see them.
Yeah, it's like the big swings versus small swings mentality. It's like, I've also done that where I've spent too much time on my website and I'm trying to do way less of that. But it's like, it doesn't really matter what is the announcement banner copy at the top. Like, just do something and go kind of thing. It's like, you need to take way bigger swings. Bigger swings is these days typically organic content. Like, instead of spending a half an hour doing this sort of thing, spend a half an hour making 2 videos and get them out there and just keep like publishing. That you mentioned Sean from Ridge, and then there was a really good Twitter post the other day where he was posting about it was Sean, I think, that posted that, right? That was talking about open sourcing, helping people with their business ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was reading through that thread, tons of people replied. He had some really good insights from his perspective. Like, he's obviously very experienced and knows what he's talking about, especially at his big level, 8 figure brand or whatever it is. I think it's 8 that he runs. But there was a lot of folks are struggling. It's a really hard, I think, economic environment right now. A lot of uncertainty. My vet or my pet insurance just went up to like 140 a month. Like, costs are going up like crazy. And side note, I used to think pet insurance was a scam until I started getting vet bills. Oh my goodness. Thousands and thousands of dollars in vain. But but there was several comments that were like, I would create, or like, what would I do if I was going back or whatever? Or like, what should I do? And his comments a lot of times were like, create organic content, post 4 times a day, repeat every
Yeah.
day or something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, and you were talking about, there's opportunity costs there a little bit in terms of time, but like in terms of spending 10,000 a day on Facebook ads versus making a bunch of organic videos, like that needs to be a lot of the focus for where we're at, especially with other underdogs out there. I'm feeling motivated
I feel
to
like
hit the middles.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the perfect example of somebody who didn't do that, who put enough excuses in along the way, and made life a lot harder, made business like a lot harder because of that. And sometimes like it is hard to do, and it's hard to put yourself out there. It's hard to fit like
Yeah.
it's just it's forcing everyone to be creative and to find a way to cut through the noise. And the problem is that it's very easy to procrastinate on that and find other things that revolve around clicking buttons and stuff, and that's the problem. And I think that's why you said a lot of the times is what stuff he was saying. And I think his comments overall across the various different businesses were very clear cut, very simple. And actually,
Yeah.
that's what made them so good, is that they were simple.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some grand strategy. It's like, no, this stuff is actually very simple if you boil it down. I think
Mhm.
that's another. I suppose that's like an overarching thing as well, is complexity. Is that you can create a lot of complexity for no reason. Whether it's like shipping, like I said, or a lot of colors, or overordering on inventory in general, or
Yeah.
um,
Adding a
taking
new
on
app, Shopify app. Adding a new app. So the single little thing adds complexity. And I think you're right. That is like one of the top 3 things I would tell myself is like, keep it simple. Do not overcomplicate. There's, it's going to, and I feel like the business is growing and now I'm at like a couple hundred orders a month, which is kind of crazy, but it's like these things, you'd think things are going to get smoother. No, things are never going to get smoother. It'll always be choppy waters. Like there'll be things that come up. There's so many fires that I've been putting out the last 2 weeks where it's like, I thought this would have not been a thing by now, but no, we're still dealing with it. And so keeping it as simple as possible, streamlining business operations, like, yeah, I would go back and shout that in my face 1,000 times over again.
Yeah. A good example of this actually is my sister. She's a few years younger than me. She lives out in LA, and she a few years ago started she likes to sew, and so she was like sewing these like bras and things. I don't know. She was like selling them on I think it's Depop, which we don't have here. I think it's only in the US, Depop. But she was selling them there, and then she kind of set it up on Shopify. No marketing whatsoever. No advertising. Never spent a single dollar on Facebook ads, and she was doing like 5 or 6,000 a month, like 7,000 a month in sales. And
Wow.
it unfortunately, I think she struggled with it because like she actually couldn't keep sewing them herself, and so she actually had to get some capital to get someone else to make this stuff, and then it became quite difficult. Then she did this while she was in college, and so it was like getting too difficult. And I think she still does it, but like a little bit, but not as much. But perfect example of like of like as and she's the most disorganized person I've ever met. Like I'm this yes, and she won't mind me saying this, but like and but I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed because she's done a good product. She kept it simple. She posted videos on Instagram, stuff like that. Leveraged channels like Depop, stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, that's an amazing business. And yeah, if she wanted to, she could scale it up and do more things. But like, she's done it the right way, which is like
That's cool.
ground up, And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a big learning point for me, is that I did not do it that way. I always went like top down and back up again, sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Keep it simple.
yeah, yeah. There we are. That's the main thing for today. Keep it simple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Keep it simple and focus on the big ROIs, I guess. We're getting close to the end of time here. Do you have any other thoughts you'd want to add on the topic here?
No, I think it's just I'm just gonna I think it's like I think talking through this has helped me kind of think about it a bit more and be like, yeah, I need to I can still simplify things a lot. And I mean, not to the point where it's like bare bones, but like just like actually focus on important things. So yeah, it's helped me for sure. Even if it hasn't helped anyone else, it's certainly helped me. Bit of therapy right
Perfect.
there.
Perfect. Yeah. It's hard. And I think that, yeah, I don't know. It's hard and there's a lot of things, but hopefully we can all help each other out. So good stuff. Cool. Well, thanks for listening, y'all. Hopefully you learned something. I think this was helpful for both of us just to talk through the mistakes we've made and learnings that we've had. But yeah, we'll catch you in the next one, post episode 20, which is pretty wild. See y'all.